Hey, I just wanted to pop on and say I'm really excited about some of the projects that we're going to be doing here in the next couple of months. At least once every couple of weeks for the next 2 or 3 months, I'm going to be releasing a full stack built from the ground up tutorial using Next.js and some different technologies, different databases, and yeah, we're going to be building, like I say, real production ready applications from the ground up. And I think this will give you an amazing grasp of the technologies, and it will take you from being able to follow along with tutorials to actually being able to go and build these applications yourself, whatever you can think up. So I'm really excited for that. If you are too, then please subscribe and stay tuned. Other than that, let's get talking about Next.js.
Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well today. I'm really excited about today's video because we are covering my favorite React framework, which is Next.js. Every project I'm building right now is using Next.js, and this video is an introduction covering all the major concepts to Next.js. However, we're going to try and dive deep into some of the really important concepts so that you can get started building production ready applications with Next.js really quickly. So with that being said, straight from the Next.js website, here you can see some of the benefits of using Next.js. So some of the really important ones, I would say, and the ones we're going to talk about today. So we've got our file system routing, which makes routing in Next.js applications extremely easy. We've got our server-side rendering, so we're going to do static generation and also server-side rendering. We'll cover those today. It gives us an image tag, which basically allows us to optimize images with no real thought about what's going on behind the scenes. And we're going to talk about how to use that today. It's absolutely brilliant. Of course, we have TypeScript support. It's got a fast reverse server, which is really reliable, and it works great to get you up and running. And of course, on the back end, we have API routes, which build into serverless functions, which have, again, really no setup or configuration for yourself as a developer. And when you combine all of this together, the developer experience is extremely good with Next.js. You can go from running one command, you've got your server up and running in development, and simply pushing your code to GitHub will deploy your production ready application. And we're going to cover all of that end to end today in this course, so I'm not sure exactly how long it's going to take. The only other slide I've got before we start coding is a little bit around data fetching, because I think that is a backbone of Next.js and why it works so well. So there is three main ways of fetching data with Next. We're going to look at all three. I just wanted to talk through them so that we understand the concept before we dive into actually writing the code. So the first one is static generation. Now, this has been done before with Gatsby. However, static generation is done at build time. So you can build an application in React. You can fetch data within the application. So let's say we have a blog. We would build the blog in React. We would do the static generation for our data fetching, and it's going to fetch all of your blog posts at build time. And essentially it's going to export a HTML, CSS, JavaScript website for you, which will never change until it is rebuilt again. And that gives you amazing performance, and it gives you amazing search engine optimization, because essentially the server is just serving static HTML web pages. So the main issue with this, I suppose, is what if you have data that changes, kind of frequently. So once every couple of hours, maybe you're having a new blog post uploaded, or once a day if it's a smaller blog, or even once a week. If you're a website developer, you're giving a website to a client, you don't want to have to go in and rebuild the website every time a change is made. So one of the things with Next.js, which is amazing, is what we call incremental static generation, which basically means if you have your blog, which is got the data fetch of fetching your posts, normally with static generation that will be done at build time. However, you can define an amount of time. So you might say every 3 hours, I want to refetch this data and statically generate the content from that data again. I don't want to rebuild my whole website, but actually I do want to incrementally refresh the data that we're getting. And that's one of the huge benefits of this. We can absolutely do that with Next.js, and we're going to talk a little bit about how. So you can have a fully static website, which is also going to be updated in increments that you can set. So it might be once every 15 minutes. If you have a lot of data and a lot of users, then you might do it once every 15 minutes. And basically that just means you're making one data fetch every 15 minutes for your blog posts. And in that 15-minute window, everyone except the first person that's actually requesting the data, everyone else is going to see a statically generated website. So we'll get into it and you will see how that works. The next thing is server-side rendering, which means that the HTML is generated from the server and it's pre-rendered essentially. So in a normal React website, where you do client-side data fetching, what happens is you land on a page, you will normally see like a loading spinner or something like that. There's no content whatsoever, and then the data fetch will happen and the page is hydrated with your data. Now with server-side rendering, basically nothing happens in the browser. The request is made to the server and the HTML is then sent over from the server, think about it like that, and it's all rendered from the server side. So this is much better for search engine optimization at the moment. And I suppose static generation is preferred if you have the ability to do that. Like I say, if we have a blog or something like that, then static generation is definitely preferred to server-side rendering, because with server-side rendering, the request to the server is made and the data fetch is done every single request. And then finally, client-side data fetching, you can do usual React client-side data fetching where that's sensible. So I'm building a large application right now, and it's got a front end where we want to have the data statically generated, so for search engine optimization purposes, but then it also has sort of a user dashboard with a profile, and they're able to do lots of things and see a dashboard for the user. But then also in the back end, there is another dashboard. So all the data in those dashboards where we don't really care about SEO, we're doing client-side data fetching in those. And we do that in a usual React way. We're going to talk about SWR, or stale while revalidate. It's actually built by the Next.js team, or Vercel, and it's great, very similar to React Query, just a lot simpler, and it's extremely easy. It's a hook that will do the data fetching for us, and it will take care of caching and things like that for us. So we're going to look at that. And with that being said, let's actually jump into building something with Next.js. So the first thing, and hopefully with this data fetching, one of the really great things about Next is you don't have to choose one. I am using, in the application I'm building at the moment, I'm using all three of these methods within the application. So that's really the benefit. You don't have to commit to any data fetching methodology. You can use all of them across your app. So you can have a real hybrid application is what they call it. And that's one of the huge benefits. So let's get started and let's actually write some code. So the first thing you need to do to start our next project is just run npx create next app. So if you've created React app before, very similar. It's going to generate us a default next starter. We're going to do create next app, and we're just going to put in the name of our project. So let's call this Next.js intro. So that is now going to install everything we need to get started. Okay, so now we have our project created. We are going to change into that directory, and we're just going to first of all open it up into VS Code here. Here we go. And then I'm going to run our dev server. So npm run dev. So let's talk a little bit about what we have. And let's talk about the folder structure. So the pages folder is a special folder within a Next.js application. And the way it works is we talk about file-based routing. Let's let me just open up our local host, and we've got our starter. So we talk about file-based routing, and that's what the pages folder allows. So that's the first thing we're going to look at. So actually, let's talk a little bit about the structure. It's relatively simple. You can see here we've got an index.js, which is being served at the root level. So your index.js is always going to be your homepage to the website. And then we have this app.js, which again, this is the highest level you can go within a Next.js application. This is the entry point to your app. And if you have a create React app, this is your app.js. Very similar, works slightly differently, but very similar. And then our index.js, this is our home page. So let's talk about file-based routing and how that works. So let's say this is our website and we want to create an about page for it. So how would we do that? So in our pages folder, if we make an about.js and we want to then, in a similar React way, we're going to use functional component. So if we just do this, we're going to call that an about page. And it's best practice for pages to have them lowercase file name, and for your components to have them uppercase. So we've got an about page, and then we'll just say this is the about page of the website. We'll save that. And if we then navigate to /about, this is the about page of the website. So it handles all that routing for us. You would do the exact same thing if you wanted any sort of top level page. So you can do contact.js. We can take this, we can change this to contact, and then we've now got a contact page. This is a contact page of the website. So we don't have to worry about routing or anything like that because Next.js handles it for us out of the box. And similar, if you wanted to have, let's say we had a blog, you might want to have, /blog/posts. So if we do blog folder with inside pages, and then we create a posts.js, and inside here we change this to posts. This is a post page of the website. If we then navigate to /blog/posts, you can see we have our posts page. So where we want additional layers like this, you would just create a folder. And of course you could have multiple different pages within your blog folder. So routing is extremely simple. Hopefully you can see that. And what if we wanted to change between these routes? So I'm not going to be doing any styling on this. So I'm just going to get rid of, maybe we can keep the container styles. I'm going to get rid of all this main content. And let's put in here, let's add a div. And let's say we wanted to have a link to our about page. You know, how would we do that? So if you're used to HTML, you might do something like this with an A tag. And you would go to your about page like this. So then if we go back to our home page, you can see there we've got our about. So if we click it, then great, it takes us to the about page of the website as you would expect. But notice we're refreshing the page. It's just like typing in about up here. And it's not what we want. We can do better than that. So what Next provides to us for routing is link. So if we import link from Next link like this, and then we want to still use A tags because this gives us, it lets the browser know like this is a link, and we need that for search engine optimization, accessibility. However, we wrap that in a link tag like so, and instead of having the href on the anchor tag, we're going to add it to the link tag like this. Okay. So now if we go back to the index page and we click about, you can see we don't get that refresh. It takes us straight to the about page, similar to what you would see in a normal React application where you have, if you're using React Router or something like that, this is how we do links in Next.js. So let me just get rid of those container styles. There we go. That's better. That looks better, doesn't it? So yeah, we have everything we need there to figure out our navigation. We could copy this and we can put a link to our contact page, and that's going to go to /contact, like so. Contact page, about page. And the thing that we don't forget when working in Next is this is a React application. So if we were doing this in a real React application, what we would probably do is we would probably want to do something like, let's make a components folder and let's make a header.js. Or you might do JSX, that's probably what most people are more used to. So we do header.jsx. You can use JSX. I normally use TypeScript, so we'll do TSX for the components and pages, to be honest. So we'll take our header, and then we might want to export default header, like so, which is going to return the same div. And inside that div, we're going to add these links to the header component. We're going to import the link from here, like so. And then on our index page, instead of that, let's bring in our header, like so. And we get the same thing. And what we could do, if we wanted this across all of our pages, is we could put this inside our app.js. So let's, like I said, this is the highest level within a Next.js application. So instead of returning this, let's just do the fragment, like so, and then we're going to return our header, and then this. And then we don't need this on our index page now. So we get rid of that. But we go back and we see the same thing is valid element type, not a function. So we've done something wrong somewhere. Head div. It's not here. contact app.js, it's not here. We've got our header, and then we've got our component. So that should be working. We just need to refresh. So if we go back, we can see we've got our header, which is on all of our pages now. And as you would in a normal React application, you would, if you wanted to add the home page, which you kind of do, then we're just going to put here home. So we change the component. If we go back, we can see we've got our home, about, and our contact page, and we can navigate between them. So that's a basic introduction to routing within Next.js. We're going to talk next more about data fetching and some examples of data fetching. Okay, so I have got us a fake API, which is going to return back to us a load of posts, and so an array of, I think, 100 posts from JSON placeholder. The link is in the description to this. So the first thing we're going to do is, let's look at how we would do this in a React website. So I'm going to do this quickly. So we're going to use effect. We're going to use effect to make the data fetch, and we're going to set it to state doing this. So then we're going to say we've got our post data and set post data equals use state, and then we're going to say we're going to use the effect, and we're going to pass this the empty dependency array. I'm working on a similar crash course for React, where we'll go through the full introduction to React. So we'll talk more about this, but just know this is going to run once when the page loads, essentially. So we're going to say in here, we're going to actually make a async function, const fetch data, and this is how you do it in a React application. So we say async, and within our use effect, we will just call that fetch data, like so. And then we're just going to say, const response equals await fetch. We're going to pass in this URL to bring the data. And then we're going to say const data equals await response dot JSON. And then we would say set post data like this. We're going to set that to data, and we should be good to go. Let's just console log out the data that we get as well, just to be sure. And then we would do something like, so we say if we have got, so let me just set that to null. So if there is not post data, then let's return, let's just say loading ... Otherwise, in here, we would potentially just say, what are we going to do? So we can do JSON.stringify, and then we'll pass in our post data, and hopefully that will just spit out the data. So let's go back to our page, go to the about page. Fetch data equals async. What fetch? I'm wrong there. Fetch data equals async function. That looks alright to me. Why is it not like that? Default.add is not a function. It looks like a function. That's confusing. Okay, so we just needed to refresh it. So we can see we've got our very pretty we've got a very pretty data in the console log. We've got our array of 100 things. So when we refresh the page, you can see for a little second we have our loading display there, and it's pretty quick. So that's how client-side data fetching generally works within React. The browser doesn't have anything, we make the data fetch, and then we can give it back to the browser. And this is happening on the client side. And this is not very good for search engine optimization. You know what, let me just see what this, let me just put something readable on the screen. So we've got a post title. So instead of just spewing everything out there, let's actually do it properly. So we might return, let's just do this, and let's just say in here, we want to take post data, if we have it, post data dot-map, and for each post, let's do this. Let's return a div with the post.title, like so, and that's going to be a lot more readable. There we go. Cool. So we have our posts there. You can see the loads, and we've got our titles displaying. So every time we change page and come back to it, we're going to see that load in, and it's going to load this data upon every load. So what are our other options for this? So the first thing that we could do if we wanted to return this from the server, so do server-side rendering. So we would keep the fact that it happens on every page load, is we could server-side render this data. So let's take a look at how we would do that. So within Next.js, you can do this in any page. So if you make a component, you couldn't do it in a component. You can do it at a page level in any page. So let's get rid of, actually we can keep most of this. So what we need to do in order to make this happen, I'm just going to go above. So we're going to do export const get server side props, like so. And we're essentially going to do a similar thing. We don't need this now. We don't need the use effect or use state. We're not going to be using that. And what we can do is we can make this an async function. So we don't need to have a separate function. We don't need the use effect. And then what we'll do is let's put this inside of get server side props. We don't need that. And there's not going to be a loading state. So we're going to simplify this a lot. Now, this function is going to run before before the page actually is hydrated to the browser, and we're going to return something from this and give it to our React component, which is our page. So let's, instead of setting the post data and console logging the data, let's do a return. We're going to return props, and we're going to return post data, which is going to be data, like so. And I'm going to receive the post data into our component like this. So we just destructure that. You could receive props, and then this will be, props.post data. We're going to receive the post data that we're sending back from our get server side props function. Save that, and let's refresh the page again. So if we go to refresh, we have the data, and you see there's no loading state. Essentially, we have a totally blank page. And like I say, I'm trying to make this as simple as possible to understand. So before our page loads, it's going to, in the browser that is, we're going to make this request to the server, And only once this request has either succeeded or failed, only then will we actually do something with a page. So a great example of a time where I've used get server-side props is if we have data within if we want to do authentication onto some data that we never ever want to be shown to a user, then we could do get server-side props. We could check for authentication, and nothing is ever going to show on screen if they're not authenticated, which is nice. Sometimes on websites where you do client-side authentication, they will get a flash of content before it works out if they're authenticated or not. With this get server-side props, it will do the authentication before anything's ever shown on screen. So what's happening with this is that on every request we are making this data fetch. Now again, this is okay for search engine optimization because it's easily readable by search engines because the data is coming from the server. However, we're doing it on every single request. Now, if that's what you want for your application, then that's absolutely fine. However, this post data, it's not going to change very often. So this is a perfect example of when we would want to do this and statically generate this page. So let me quickly show you something. Yeah, so we should be passing in a key. So we want to map the post to div, let's put key equals, and does it have an ID? Let's hope it has an ID. I'm sure it will have an ID. Yeah, okay. Okay, so let's actually do something here. And just for the record, if we console log the data here, and then we revisit the page again, we're not going to see any data because what's happening inside of this get server-side props function, this is running on the server. This function is running on the server, and this is the data it's passing back to the client side, to the browser. So if you wanted to console log in the browser, you'd have to do console log post data like this, and there we go, we see the array. When we're console logging the data here, we see it on the server side. So here's our data on our development server. So that's just a good thing to know. So let's get rid of that. And let's stop the server running. And I'm going to do npm run build. And what this is going to do is it's going to build the website for production. So we were running the dev server before. We're now building it for production. Of course, you wouldn't normally do this on your local machine. However, it's a really good way to see. So you can see here at the bottom, we've got our definitions. So if we've got this little lambda looking symbol, that means it's server-side renders at runtime. And if you look at our about page, we have that symbol. And also our hello page, which we're going to talk about later. Our index page is just a static page. There's no fancy content on there. It's just a static page, which is going to be served as static HTML. However, our about page is server-side rendering. So let's bring back up our dev server, and let's talk about how we would do the static generation now. And you know what? It really is easy once we've got server-side props set up, because we just changed that to get static props. And let me point something out here. So if I open up my network tab, and when I make a request, we can see where we are. So if we do look at this, we search. There is not actually, it's not actually appearing that we're making a like a usual request. We're requesting the about page here. So yeah, that can show you what I was thinking of. But essentially, like I say, every time we're refreshing this page now, a data fetch is happening from the server side, and it's hitting the API. So when we do get static props, that's not going to happen. Now, one of the cool things about the development server is, whenever we're going to the about page, it will fetch this data fresh within get static props. Because if you're building a blog or something like that and you're making changes in a CMS, you're going to want to see those changes when they happen. However, if we do the same thing again and we do npm run build and we build this now, you will see that our about page, you can see it's automatically generated as static HTML. So if we do now npm start, which is going to start our production server, and we go to the same link, this is static HTML. There's no data fetching happening anywhere. It's already happened at build time. It's extremely fast and it's extremely quick. So there's no data fetching happening at all on this page. So what if we wanted to make it so that we fetch new data every hour or every minute? Let's take a look at that. So within our get static props, we are returning our props. We can also return revalidate, and this is going to be a time. So if you wanted to do every five minutes, you would do like 300 seconds like this. So if you put it to something like 1 second, then what I said before wouldn't be true. If we run build again, we will see now. So notice before we have this white dot for the static generation, and now we have our incremental static regeneration of 1 second. So that's going to run the data fetch literally every second. So you're not really benefiting from your incremental static regeneration if you're doing it that often. However, it's going to be fetched every second. Those data fetches are happening. So hopefully that gives a good overview on the different methods and how you can use them within a Next.js application. And I think it's important to remember, in reality, like we might want to set this to, we'd want it a lot higher than 1 second. If you wanted to do, every 5 minutes, something like 300 seconds. It's reasonable if you have a high traffic website and you have, 1,000 people visit your website every 5 minutes, then you're going to save yourself a lot of requests to the back end of your website. But also, all of those users, they're always going to see a static website. And that really is great for performance, great for search engines indexing your website. So wherever you can, let's use get static props. Wherever you really need search engine optimization and things like that. If you need to be requesting on every request, but the data isn't really changing within the page itself, then use get server side props. So you might want to do that if you had, like an e-commerce website. You might want to server side render all of your products and things like that. You could absolutely statically do that as well, by the way, but maybe you want pricing data and everything like that to be the most up-to-date possible at all times, so you're going to server-side render it. However, there's not really much data changing on the page, so that's where you would choose to do the server-side rendering. And if you have data within a dashboard that is changing a lot, your users got forms and it's submitting and you're refetching and all of this, then do your client-side fetching and because it's hidden behind a dashboard, the search engine optimization is probably not that relevant. Now, one thing to mention is you don't have to choose just one. Like I said, if you have a e-commerce website, yeah, okay, your store, your actual shop part of the website where you're displaying your products and your categories and things, maybe you want to server-side render them. Like I said, maybe you want always up-to-date information from the server. But on your homepage or on your landing pages, you're going to be able to statically generate those. And that really is the power of Next.js and the data fetching methods that they have. So hopefully this was a good introduction to data fetching. So we're now going to talk about also continuing on with data fetching a little bit, but we're going to talk about dynamic routing. So let's actually make this a little bit more, so it makes a bit more sense for our project. So we're going to take our about page. I'm going to rename it, and I just deleted it. Let's undo that. I'm going to rename that, and I'm going to call it posts. On our header, let's rename it posts and call it posts, because we're going to build a bit of a mini blog, because it's one thing being able to list all of the posts, which is great. You will probably want to do that on your own website, but you're also going to want to be able to go view an individual post. So we're not going to have a blogs folder. This is just going to be a blogging website where we have posts. Probably not how you would set it up, but you know how to do your routing now. So let's refresh. Nothing happens. Because we're not running our dev server. So let's do npm run dev. So when we run our production server, clearly the code isn't going to change it. But we're back in our dev server now. We don't have an about page. We do have a posts page. That's great. And then just for correctness, let's name this posts. Doesn't really matter what you call it. It's really important in your components to name them the right thing, so that you can auto import and things like that. So yeah, okay. So we've got our post page, which has got our post data. So let's say we want to be able to click on our post titles, and let's just make this a bit more readable. So we do margin, and then I've not written actual CSS in so long, but I think this is top and bottom. So if we do 2 pixels, that'll be top and bottom, right? Oh, that's everywhere. So let's just make that 5 pixels, whatever. Give it a bit of space. Okay, fine. So it's a little bit more readable. Let's 5 pixels and 0. So just top and bottom. Let's do 10 pixels top and bottom, and then 20 pixels left and right. Whatever. Doesn't matter. This is better, right? We can actually see. So let's say we wanted to link to an actual post. So we're going to want to be able to go to /post /1, for example, and we want to be able to see the first post. So of course we don't have that page at the moment. So first of all, let's make that happen. So we want to be able to click on this as a link. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to import a link from NextLink, and that's going to allow us to create links. So we're going to make a link, and we're going to make an anchor tag inside of that, which is not going to go anywhere. It's just, like I said, for correctness, so the browser knows it's actually an anchor. You can wrap a link around pretty much anything, to be honest. So it's important that you use the right underlying, whether it's a button or it's an anchor tag, etc. And then we want this to navigate to /post / and then the actual ID, right? So let's do that. So we're going to do template strings, and we're going to type /post / and we're going to say post.id. Okay, so now if we click it, you can see we're getting the same thing. So we're going /post /1, which is great, but we don't actually have anything here. So let's fix that. So remember when I mentioned before in the routes, if you wanted to have like /blog and then have something after it, you needed a blog folder. We're actually going to create a post folder now as well. So we'll do post like this. And then here comes the magic of the dynamic route. We're going to create a file inside, and we're just going to call this ID like this in square brackets. And this is how you do dynamic routing. You can call this whatever you want. You could call this post ID, and I'll show you what that would change in a second. So we've got our square bracket ID inside, and we've got our dynamic route now here. So inside the dynamic route, what do we want to do? So we want, of course, to export our default function, which is going to be a post, and we're going to return in here a div, which is hopefully going to show our post content, like so. So if we now click on this, we have our post content being displayed. Now, of course, it doesn't matter which post I click on, we're going to display this exact same post content. This route is catching everything after post / any ID whatsoever right now, which is great. So let's talk about how we do dynamic routing and fetching. And hopefully we can agree on the fact that within a blog, the posts are not going to change very often. And when they do, we're okay with our users waiting, let's say 24 hours for them to be updated. So with that being said, what we want to do is we want to statically generate these. So the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to, in order to statically generate, we're going to need our getStaticProps function. So let's just copy this and paste it in here. And instead of this URL, we want to actually fetch, let's make this a template string. And we want to fetch /post / and we want to put like some ID in here. And our getStaticProps, it has a context, and we're going to destructure the params from that context. You know, if you want to have a further look, you know, take the context like this, and you can console log out the context. We just want the params, which is essentially this. So our params is going to be .id. If we called this post ID, it will be params.postID. So we're then going to say we want to get our params.id. And like I say, this ID is coming from the name that we give this dynamic file. So our getStaticProps function has a context. Like I say, you can go have a look at it, research it on the next docs, but that's beyond the scope of this tutorial. Just know that it takes in these params. Another way to fetch this is we can use our router, which we'll talk about soon. Okay, so we're now fetching data with an ID. However, this won't work. We're going to get an error. And we said 24 hours, so 60 seconds in a minute, there is 60 minutes in an hour, and there is 24 hours in a day. So that should give us 24 hours worth of seconds to revalidate. So that it's going to refetch the data once every 24 hours. So like I said, this won't actually work yet. We're going to return a post, which is just going to be our data. And let me just double check that this URL is the right one. So I am just /post /1, And yeah, Brill. So that's working. Cool. So we're going to get an error if we now click on a post. Did I save that? Why am I not getting an error? That's not what I expect. Post /1. Okay, good. Now we get an error. So get static paths is required for dynamic pages. And basically, whenever we do a data fetch in our posts page, for example, it's only one set of data that we're going to be fetching inside our get static props function. As in, when we build our website, we're telling what data we want to fetch in advance, and it's going to do that because it knows that this posts page exists. However, when we're in a dynamic page like this, it has no idea how many posts we have. And if this was a real blog, we wouldn't be fetching by an ID, we'd probably be fetching by a post slug. And it has no idea what those slugs are. So how can it statically generate all of these posts where it doesn't know what they are? So what we're going to do is we're going to export another function which Next.js gives us. So we're going to say export const get static paths like this. And what we're going to do for simplicity here is we're going to return paths, which is going to be an empty array, and we're going to return fallback, which is going to be true. And what this means is we're saying in advance, you know what, we don't actually know any of the paths ourselves. When we have fallback mode to true, it's going to go try and find it. So let me show you what I mean. So now if we refresh and we do posts and we click on it, we're still getting the same post content, but instead of just doing this, let's do a h1 and we do post.title, and let's do a paragraph tag, and then I think it was post.body like this. Post is not defined. So of course we're returning our post, but we also need to bring it in to our actual React component. And there we go. We have our post title. If I go to a different post, then click on it, and we have different title, different content. So it's working. Now let me show you what happens if fallback is false. If I click on one of these, we get a 4 or 4. So get static paths is a function. We could, inside of this function, we could go and fetch, for example, exactly the same as this. We could go and fetch the 100 posts. We could then, for all of those posts, we could generate an array of paths for all those posts. And it's actually quite a standard practice to do that. And what that means is all of your posts are going to be created on build time, because you're telling Next.js, these are all the posts in my database. I want you to go and find them now and statically generate the pages for all of these posts. And then fallback false is saying, if it's not in this array of paths or posts that we're defining in advance, we're not interested in it. I just want you to 4 or 4. What fallback mode as true does is it says, do you know what? Even if it's not in the array, I'm gonna still run the get static props function, and I'm gonna try and return the data that you're asking for. And if it can return the data, then all is well. It will serve the page. However, if it can't, it will 4 or 4. So we don't actually need to define any paths up front. The only difference that it will make is, when you build your website and you visit it for the first time, you are going to actually have a data fetch happen. So in order to sort of display that, let's use our router. So Next.js gives us a router hook, use router. import use router from next router, and then we can say in our function here, we'll say router equals use router, and our router, I'll show you here, our router gives us it will give us this ID along with a few other things. So you can see this is our router, but one of the properties it gives us is this is fallback. So if I refresh the page right now, we're not going to see it. Cannot read property, title of undefined, /post. So we've got our is fallback as false because it's gone out and it's found it. But notice what happened when I refresh the page. Can't read property of undefined. Now, what is happening here? Basically, we're trying to fetch the data in our getStaticProps function, but while at the same time we're actually trying to render the data here. So it's saying, post.title, and it doesn't actually exist. So I mean, you could fix it by just saying if there's a post, then do that, and there we go. It's fixed. It kind of comes up on the screen after the fact. And again, remember that when we're in the dev server, every single time we're refreshing the page, it's doing a new fetch. It wouldn't do this in the production server. But let's do this properly. And if we're going to be fetching data, we want to let the user know, what, we're fetching data. So we can say if router is fallback, then I just want to return, and then we're again just going to do a div. I'm going to say loading. So what's going to happen here is the getStatic paths is going to see, do I recognize the path? We're passing an empty array, so it doesn't. So the router is going to go into fallback mode, where it's going to try and fetch the data anyway. When the router is in fallback mode, then we're going to say to the user, what, we're loading, we're trying to find your data right now. If we successfully return the data, then we're no longer in fallback mode, and then we're actually going to render the data to the screen. And that's going to fix the issue with that one. So you can see if we refresh now, we get loading, and then the data pops up. Yeah. And just as you can kind of clearly see that loading there. If we now build this website, like so, what we're going to see is, because we're statically generating this, the first time that we visit a post, we're going to see, we can't really see the loading, it's so fast. But my point was going to be that the first time we click on this, it will be in fallback mode and it will have that really short loading. However, the second time that we do it, it will just be instant, because it's now statically generated, and it's a static page, and it's going to instantly pop up. The router is no longer in fallback mode because it knows about this path, and it has statically generated the page for this path. So yeah, depending on, if you're talking about a small blog post like this, there's not really much benefit in defining all your paths in advance, because it's going to be so quick to load it for the user anyway. If you've got a huge blog post with loads and loads of content, then actually you might really want to statically generate it all at build time for the first time, to prevent like a long load, for example. However, hopefully you can see, and again we have this ISR on our posts. We don't actually have it, that's just automatically generated SSG. So why isn't that revalidate working? who knows how many seconds in a day. 86,400. So if we want to do it once a day, we set those seconds to 86,400, and let's just make sure that that is actually going to be working. I think I've had that before actually, where it's not shown up in here when it's dynamic, but it is going to incrementally regenerate. So hopefully this is a good introduction to dynamic routing. Whenever you're doing a dynamic route and you're doing get static props, you need get static paths. You know, it's not too complicated within here to make a call to either your database or your API and pull out the paths and pass them as an array to this paths object. That's not a problem. You can see if we're doing fallback mode as true, then in order to prevent, you know, this being undefined when we first try to render it, then we're going to add in this. If we're in fallback mode, then just display this loading. And again, of course, you could easily switch this out to server-side render your blog post content as well if you wanted to. However, you're going to be fetching data on every single request. So the next great thing we're going to look at is next image. So I've got my dev server up and running, and what we're going to do is on our homepage, we're going to add an image. And we're going to look at how to use next image in a couple of different ways. So the first thing we're going to look at it is, you know, how we actually get images to load and what the benefits are. And then we're going to look at a little bit of the finicky details around CSS. It took me a little while to figure this out myself. So hopefully I can spare you the time. So we have a public folder here, and any assets for your website, you're going to put in your public folder. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to make an images folder. I've been onto Unsplash and downloaded an image here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this into, one second, I'm just renaming it as index image, and then I'm going to copy that into my images folder within the directory. Just bear with me one second, I'm just doing it on the other screen. Next.js, intro, public, images, and we'll paste that in there. Okay, perfect. So we've got our index page image, as you can see here, and I've also just taken the URL and I'm just going to pop that as a comment up here so we have it. So let's actually just look at, you know, how we display an image in a website. So hopefully you have done this before, and we've got a regular image tag. We're going to put in a source, and with a static folder like this, we're just going to say the public folder, we just use the path images like this, /images, /index image dot, and then what is it? It's a .jpg, like so. Homepage image. Okay, and then if we pull up our application, do we have our dev server running? Yeah, perfect. So clearly pretty big image. So if we put that in a div, we could set the width and the height on this image itself, but we're not going to do that for now. What I just want to do is I'm going to show you the console, and if you go to where is it at? It's not a network request, is it? If we inspect the image itself, where does it tell us how big it is? So we can see we've got a 6,000 by 4,000 image, and I'm actually just going to swap that out for the remote image like this for a second. And on our network tab, we can see here, so this image is already a WebP because it's coming from Unsplash. So I'm just gonna change that, all of that. I'm gonna get rid of everything that Unsplash is doing. And then we get our normal image that we request. So if you use an API like Unsplash, they're gonna do a bit of optimization there for you. But now if we look, our image that we've just transferred, it's 10 megabytes that we've just had to transfer, which is why you saw, we refresh the page, it's like very slow, really slow, okay? Still going. And you know, we can put a height of like 500, a width of 500, like so. And then if we refresh, we get exactly the same thing. Look how slow it's coming. Yeah, we're getting this huge image, and it's still not there to display this really small image. And now we finally have our image. Yeah, 10 megabytes transfer again. So look, if you've ever given a website to a client, then you will know you give them an amazing optimized website, and then they put a couple of 10 megabyte images on it and it loads like that, and then they complain at you, why is my website so slow? It's like, I don't know, gee, I wonder. So yeah, next image is awesome. So let me undo everything I've just done. So I've got my URL back and we've got the local image stored. So let's import. To be fair, I'm done with the local image now. I just wanted to show you how you can load images locally. Let's do it remotely. And let's get rid of all that other stuff on the URL. So we're not changing the image at all. Let's import image from next image, like so. And we have a couple different ways of displaying an image. So we're gonna just pull in that image, and we're going to give it a source, which is going to be this. And if we just do this, we're going to get a couple of errors. So first of all, we need to give it a width and a height, kind of. We'll talk about that. But we also need to declare in our next config the remote domains. So let's see which error we get first. Yeah, so we need to set width and height. So let's do that. So let's do width equals 500. Let's do like 500, and height equals 500. And it's going to tell us we need to configure images.unsplash.com. So whenever you're loading images from a remote source, you need to add them into a next config. So let's create a new file, next.config.js, and then we're just going to do module.export, and then we're going to say images like this. We're going to list out the domains that are allowed, like so. And now we've changed the next config, we need to restart the server, and our image should now work. If I did that right, I don't remember. I think that's the syntax. Apparently not. Okay, so our image is now worked. So the first thing that I just want to point out, if we look at the network tab, and I'm not sure if that page load was slow because of, yeah, it was just the server starting up. So when we're refreshing now, look how quick it is. And if we look at our network tab, it's cached right now, actually, but the image size is actually 44 kilobytes. So if I just do a hard reload of this, you can see it is a WebP image. So it's done that for us. Remember, I removed everything from Unsplash. So this is the same 10 megabyte image from Unsplash, and it is serving us a 44 kilobyte WebP. And because we defined the width and the height, Next image has default image, if you call them breakpoints, I guess. Next.js image documentation. Let's have a look. So I think it's in the image optimization page. Yeah, so under the device sizes, you can see here we've got different sizes, and it will display different image sizes by default. So the closest matching to 500 by 500, you can see when we hover over the image, it's given us a 640 by 427 image to display here. Of course, CSS wise, we'd want to do we'd want to set the object fit. So we could pass in here style. What do you even call this? Is it object? No, why is that not working? I haven't wrote actual CSS styles for such a long time. I'm pretty sure it's object fit, like this, like cover or something like that. Who knows? I don't know why it's not giving me. I use Tailwind CSS for everything. Let's forget about CSS. We don't need CSS. Okay. So, yeah, we'll not worry about the CSS that matters. Actually, yeah, why is that not working? Object. Oh, I'm like, I don't want to fit. Object fit CSS. Why is that not working? CSS object fit. Oh, so annoying. Image width height. Object fit. Cover. Yeah. So why is that not working? Style. Object fit. Cover. I'm pretty sure that must be working, right? It looks kind of distorted. Maybe not. Yeah, it's definitely distorting. Okay, give me a second to figure this out. Okay, I changed my mind. I'm not actually going to figure it out. What I'm going to do is, I am going to, whilst doing this, I'm going to show you another cool thing about Next.js and the way it handles CSS. So I'm going to make a file. I don't want it in our pages. I'm going to make a component for this image, and I'm just going to call it, index image.jsx. Let's do this, index image, perfect. Let's take the div and let's take the image like this. I don't want that div now then. And we're gonna need to import image from next image, like so. On our index page, I'm going to index image, and we should have the same thing on screen. Perfect. So for CSS, what I'm going to do is, we don't need this now. I am going to create in the components folder, I'm going to create a file called indeximage.module.css, like this. And then I'm going to say image.image style. And we're going to pass in our image styles here. So we're going to say object fit cover. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to import styles from image index module.css. And I'm going to say class name, no. We do style or class name? I think class name equals styles dot, was it index image I called the image style. image style. Perfect, that doesn't look distorted at all. I think it works. Like whenever I have to write CSS, I don't use this JavaScript CSS. I always do this. Okay, so it's not distorting, so that's good. Perfect. So let's continue talking about next image. So one of the things that happens quite a lot is, I mean, first of all, we need to declare the width and the height. And what that does is it prevents cumulative layout shift on your website. And if you look at what it's actually doing, if we go into our source code here, and we've got a div, and we've got this magic happening here, where basically it's wrapping our image tag, which is here, it's wrapping it in a div of itself, which is basically preventing the layout shift from happening, because the div is always going to render, but the image might take a little bit of time to load. So that makes sometimes styling it a little bit funky. For example, what if you don't always want to declare the width and the height? If you want to do something like, maybe you have, so let's do it here. Oh, it's not Tailwind. Maybe we had a grid and we had two images side by side. So let's do that, and I will show you kind of my point. So I'm just getting a URL for a different image. So let's copy the image location inside of this. So we've got that. Let's get rid of all the Tailwind stuff here. Not Tailwind, Unsplash stuff here. Like so. And this div, so I'm going to wrap another div around everything. I've got a div with one image. I'm going to copy and paste this. So I've got another div with another image. Why isn't prettier working either? There's something broken. Who knows? Image, div, image, div, image. And then the wrapper div. And then if we take this, like so. Okay, we've now got two images. Perfect, that's kind of what we want. So if I put on here class name equals, what are we gonna, styles dot, let's call it container. And then we do dot container, and we display this as a grid. Not grid, flex. Display flex. Okay, now we have our two images. And if we wanted these to be, they're responsive as they are, but let's say we had content next to them, like text, and we wanted all the images to be the same size. Basically, we don't want to define the image size. This was something I struggled with for quite a bit, because if we do this, we take this off, and we take this off, it's going to break right now, as you can see, but we can give it this layout equals fill. And basically, it's going to fill the available space. Like so. Where have my images gone? We've got an image. Yeah, so we have our image. I could not load the image. So for some reason, the images are not loading. Oh, my computer ran out of memory, so the dev server stopped. Okay, bear with me a second, let me fix that. Okay, yeah, so my computer ran out of memory, so that is fun. So let's reload this again on our index page. Is it happening again? Okay, cool. Now we've got our images. So that's working. Refresh. Cool. So we've got our 2 images. However, they just fill all of the available space. You know, cool thing to point out, you know, we still have these image sets and the image is still significantly smaller. So we've got 200 kilobytes versus 400 kilobytes as opposed to, and you know, these are displaying at 1920 by 1080, the full size of the screen. So they're of course going to be bigger. So what do we need to do to actually control the sizing of these images? Apologies for how bad this is looking. I don't know why, but Prettier is not playing nice with me today. Like I said, I think it's something to do with my local settings, because I normally define the config per project level. Okay, that looks better. So you got the 2 images. So the first thing we need to do, if we want these to be constrained by the layout, and I think that's a common thing that we do as web developers, is, you know, we don't set image widths. However, we let the layout constrain them. So we've got this, where's our CSS? So we've got this container. I want to, it's displayed flex, like so. So let's say here, what we can do to actually constrain these is we can add, oh, I need to do this bloody style dot class name equals styles dot image div. And I'm gonna have these wrapper styles for the image. So we say it's dot image div, and then what I want to do this is position this as relative, and then on the image style I want to position it absolute, like so. Now you can see it's all gone away. So within our flex, within the image div, I want to say the width of this, let's say it's 50%, like this. We're still not going to see the images because we don't have a height defined. So we can say height is 400 pixels. And then boom, we have our images, like so. Now, of course, we might want to, on this container, we'll set a max width of like 1100 pixels, like that. And you might set a margin of 0 auto, so they're centered. And we've now got these images which are constrained to their containers. And if we look at the network tab, we can, let me just refresh it. We've got our 2 images. They are still pretty big sizes, so that's something to watch out for. You know, these, let me just refresh that. These images, they're showing, because we're not defining a width and a height for the images, it's not using the biggest size available, but it's using the screen size of 1920, and it's making this image pretty big, as opposed to when we define the size of the image, it would use a smaller image. So it's still a WebP. It's still a heck of a lot smaller than if we were just using a regular HTML image tag. However, where you can, it's going to be best to define the width and height of your image. Where you can't, because you're doing like a fancy grid layout or whatever it is, whatever reason that it may be, yeah, use image this way. Have the div that's surrounding the image, you know, make that relative, and you will use that to constrain the image and then set the image as absolute, which sits on top of your div. So hopefully this is a good introduction to Next Image and the benefits that it offers and how to actually work with them. So the next thing we're going to quickly go over is environment variables. So long story short, they're taken care of for you. You don't need to use any package like .env or anything if you're familiar with that, or if you built Express servers and things like that before. However, there's a couple of things to know, because when we were like this getStatic props function, this is running on the server side. Same as if you were doing a get server side props, same as if you were using an API route. This is all on the server side. So when you're building a full stack application, you need to consider, and normally you have separation, right? Where if you're building an API and it lives, on its own, you know that the environment variables for that server, they're never going to be accessed by, some React application, because you only interact with your API through the API routes and things like that. You're never going to be sending any environment variables, mistakenly. However, maybe you could in a Next.js application. And that's why you have two types of environment variables. You have a regular environment variable, which might be like, super secret. And we'll set that to, this is a secret. And then we'll have one that's not so super secret. Basically, where we just define a regular name like this is not exposed to the client. It won't work. Where we have next public underscore secret, like so, this is not so secret. This will work. This prefix of next underscore public, it makes it available. So if you wanted, for example, if you were doing your data fetching and you wanted to, if we're building an API locally, you might want to have an environment variable that says, go to localhost /5000 /posts. When you're on production, then you might want to go to, like this actual URL /posts. So this is why we have environment variables between environments. So you might have a next underscore public underscore URL, and they put in here like HTTP, we're local, so we're about localhost 5000 /posts. Well, you just do localhost 5000. It's just defining your actual environment. The rest of it you would normally leave off. And you'll be able to use this. So where we're doing a data fetch here, you'll be able to use that environment variable safely. I mean, this is run on the server side anyway, so in theory you could. However, if you're doing in your use effect, you were doing your data fetching, it wouldn't work unless you prefixed it with next underscore public. So let me give you an example. On our index page, if we do a div right now, and we say, we've got too many, and we say process.env.super underscore secret, and you can use environment variables anywhere like this, and then we do process.env next public secret, and then we need to restart our dev server anytime we change the .env file. When we open this up and it refreshes, we can see we just have this is not so secret. The other one is not displaying because it's not actually exposed to the client. If we're in getStatic props and we do console log, what is it, super secret like this, this is on our ID page. So we go to post, and then we go to a post. If we go to our console, we can see the secret here, because this is actually running on the server side. It's not exposed to the client. It's a server side thing. And it's important to understand that you shouldn't really rely on this. However, it's there as a safety option. Like if you're having environment variables, they need to be a secret. Like use best practices to keep them a secret. Do not expose them to the client, and understand the places where you would be. However, where you have like actual secrets, you know, make sure you're not using Next public. If you want something to be usable by your front end like React application as an environment variable, like I say, if you were data fetching client side, then you would need to be having a Next public URL as an example for that. So hopefully that is everything you need to know about environment variables. Basically, you just define them and you use the process.env dot whatever you define. However, if they need to be accessible on the client side, then you need to prefix them with Next public. So one thing that I haven't mentioned as of yet is this head component. Now, Next.js doesn't have, you know, in a create React application, normally you will have this index.html page, which you can kind of define your title. And then you can do some magic to get the titles on each individual page. With Next.js, it's much simpler. And let's say on our post page, we want to have a title. We would import head from next head, and we would simply, instead of returning just a div, let me just wrap that in a fragment like this, and then we can just say head, and then we can put in here the title. Then we can just say like post.title. And then when we navigate, do we have our dev cell? Yeah, when we navigate to our post, we can, the title's not actually there. Okay, now the title's here. We can see the titles are coming up like so. But if we wanted to, we could easily do, you know, like blog like this, and then we've got like this. I think a cool thing or a good practice to do so when you're doing this is to make a custom title almost, or it's like the meta for your page. If you wanted to add like a meta description and a meta title and things like that, you can do you know, like a meta component like this. So let's just make export default function meta, and then inside of this we're just going to return, we're going to do head like that, and inside of here we're going to do a title, which is going to be like awesome blog, and then we're going to do this like title, and we're going to take props as title like so. And now what we can do on this page, instead of having head, we can bring in meta like that and pass in title equals we just want post.title actually, and there we go. We should get the exact same thing. So we've got our awesome blog, and that's on it on every page. And then of course you can include this meta tag in any of your pages just like this. So instead of having head, we would bring in meta title equals homepage, something like that. And then when we go back home, we got awesome blog homepage. And you can do that however you want, you know, be creative. This is essentially like your your header section in HTML, where you can add links and CSS and things. Now, if you wanted to include CSS, like a CDN, a style sheet or anything, you would need a custom document, which we can quickly touch on. Next.js custom document. So you might want to add some stuff in your document. Where is it at? Underscore document. Here we go. So basically, I always do the exact same thing when I'm making this, just underscore document.js, and then you've got this custom document like so, and then you would add any style sheets or things like that into this head. I think we're getting there. Hopefully you all have a good understanding of how Next.js is working. I just want to quickly expose you to this folder called API. Now, look, this API folder, think of it as an Express server which you can easily just access. So it's built in for you. It isn't an Express server. What happens when you create a route in here, so for example, hello, like this, when you create this route, and it works in the same way as your pages folder, where whatever you call it is your route name. So pages /API/hello. So on the index page here, if we wanted to make a call to our API, then you would, I'm not going to type it all out now, but you would fetch, you do /API/hello, and then, and again, of course, you do that in a use effect or whatever, then you would be hitting your backend API route. Now, what this is used for is interacting with a database, submitting contact forms, authentication, and things of that nature. You can use API routes for all of that stuff. If you, traditionally with a React application, my stack for full stack development was, a long time a MERN stack. So we'd use MongoDB, which would link into an Express API with a React application as the front end. Now, the database or whatever you use doesn't really matter. You can use MongoDB and something like Mongoose in your API routes. You can use absolutely anything you want. The next video I'm going to do is going to be another full stack building something, which is really exciting. We're going to have a cool application. We're going to build, full stack from scratch, and we're going to be using these API routes for absolutely everything to do with our backend. And if you think of these API folder as the backend of your application, which interacts with your database, and then you would use the front end of your app to interact with the API routes in the same way as you would a normal API server that you would do. All these API routes are deployed as serverless functions, and if you're hosting on Vercel, they just work. So it's really, again, just a great developer experience where you can spin up a Next.js application, hook up a database, and you're literally, if you want to get posts, you create a get post route like this. You would do this, and then in here you would be connecting to your database, like getting your posts, and then just returning them to your front end as you normally would in an Express server. So I'm not going to give examples of what you can do with this. In my contact form video, we use it to do contact forms. And like I say, in the next video, we're going to be building out a whole backend using API routes and also the front end in Next.js. So that's going to be really cool. So we're going to go through API routes in detail there. There's lots of stuff you can do with them. But for now, just know that if you think of it as an Express server, you can see the syntax is very similar, where the route is taking in a request and a response, and you're sending back. It gives you these methods like your status.json, or you can send. And like I say, I've built pretty large applications with a lot of these routes in them, and performance is pretty good with serverless functions. So yeah, that's API routes kind of in a nutshell, but not going to go into too much depth. If you've used Express before, you will be absolutely fine. So the last thing we're going to do is we're going to deploy this to Vercel and see how easy that is. So I am going to call this Next.js intro. Sorry, I'm on GitHub right now. I'm creating a new repository. When you create a Next application, it's already got an initialized GitHub repository locally, and it's got your git ignore ready for you. So I am going to, where's it at? Here. So we're going to create a new public repository and just hit create. What I'm then going to do is I'm going to, we can just kill the server for now. So we'll just add everything, git commit, message, initial commit. That's always the case. Initial commit and we're finished. I'm going to copy this, git branch -m main. That's fine. Git remote add origin. So I'm using SSH credentials for mine. Make sure you pick the right one, and then we're going to push to our main branch. So that is done. Let me just log into Vercel. So I'm going to hit new project. I'm going to import the GitHub repository that we just created. I'm going to choose my personal account for this rather than the team. I'm going to leave it with the default settings, and I'm going to hit deploy. It is that easy. If you have environment variables, you can add them. We didn't actually use any in our code. And what this is doing now, it is just building our application. It's going to install our npm packages. It's going to run next build. And that is pretty much going to be it. It's going to deploy it for us. You can see that was pretty quick. And this is, again, one of the good things that makes Next.js really convenient for me is Vercel. I think the dashboard is great. The deployment is super simple. You just literally push to the GitHub repository. We can now visit our application. There's our posts. And this is live on the interwebs for everyone to see. So beautiful blogging application. We don't need CSS for this one. And yeah, I think performance wise this would be performing really well as far as applications go, and we didn't really set anything up, and you can see already that we've got our images cached and things like that. So there's a lot of optimization that comes here out of the box with Next.js that you don't really need to think about or set up or do anything with yourself. And you can say we're running the production build of React, and we didn't do anything like that. So yeah, hopefully this was a good introduction into Next.js. I'm going to be releasing a full stack video next week, which is going to be awesome. The goal with that video is to literally take you from finishing this video to being competent and really building full stack app. We're going to have auth, user login, and we're going to build out the full backend using the Next.js API routes. So yeah, stay tuned for that one. Hit subscribe. That will be coming next week. I will see you all soon.